What is going on, guys? My name is Bucky Roberts and welcome to your very first tutorial in biology. Now, in this video series, what I want to do is I want to talk to you guys about many different topics concerning biology. For example, I want to talk to you guys about DNA and genetics and cells and bacteria and life and a whole bunch of interesting stuff. But since this is the very first video, I think what we should do in this video is just stick with the very basics. And the first thing I want to do is talk to you guys about what is biology? So let's go ahead and answer that question. And the definition of biology is this: the study of life and living organisms. All right, that makes sense up to a certain point, up until organisms, because you may have heard of organisms before, and you may have your own definition, but the scientific definition of an organism is a living thing. Well, that's easy. We know what living things are. I'm a living thing. Plants, grass is a living thing. My puppy, named Old Dan, cutest puppy ever, by the way, is a living thing. But whenever we talk about living things, believe it or not, things get kind of complicated because then you have to ask yourself, what is life? Well, of course, if you ask your grandma or your best friend, or even if you ask a philosopher, what is life? Everyone is going to give you kind of a different definition of their outlook on life. However, whenever scientists and biologists were first deciding, what is life? That's the problem that they had. Everyone had their own separate definition of life itself. So, what they needed to do before biology was even invented, which is, of course, the study of life, is scientists needed to agree on the definition of life. So, right now, modern day, what they did is they made a definition based on 8 different characteristics or 8 different rules that something must follow in order to be considered a living thing or an organism. So what I'm going to do in the upcoming videos, I don't know if it's going to take just this video or maybe I'm going to have to split it up into 2 or 3 videos, but I'm going to be covering each rule 1 through 8, and these are the rules that define the characteristics of life. So let's go ahead and get started with rule number 1. Now, rule number 1, or in other words, the first characteristic that something must have in order to be considered a living thing, is that living things are made of cells. Now, you may have heard of the term cells before. If not, don't worry, we're going to be covering them in a few videos. But every living thing is made of cells, and these things called cells contain something called DNA. Now, the reason I said if you never heard of cells before, don't worry about it right now, is because even though the definition of a cell is like the smallest single unit of life, I really don't want to get into it any more than that, and this is why. Some people go to school for 8 years and then they work their entire career towards learning about the human cell, just the human cell. So obviously it's a very complex topic and I really can't, tell you guys everything about a cell in a, 5-minute video. So that's why I want to talk about it in detail later on. But for now, just remember the rule of something or that something has to follow in order to be considered a living thing is that all living things are made up of these smaller units or smaller living things called cells, and in every cell is something called DNA. Now, you guys are also probably familiar with DNA. If not, once I draw the picture, you guys are gonna understand what it is. It's the thing that kind of looks like a twisted ladder and it has these little rungs in between. And even though you may be familiar with the shape, but not exactly what it is, again, we're going to be going into more detail about what exactly it is. But for right now, if curiosity is just killing you and you want to know what it is, DNA is basically the genetic material or instruction for the structure and the function of cells. Basically, it's part of the brain of the cell. So without DNA, your cell would be kind of dumb.